Hey everybody, Dieter Kurtenbach with Larry Kruger here in the KNBR studios in San Francisco. And Larry, no news to talk about this week, so it's going to be a short podcast, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing going on. New quarterback, new
So
whole
much.
offense, hopefully. I don't know. We'll see. But Blaine Gabbert steps in for Colin Kaepernick, and now the question is, what's the over-under on the number of dropbacks he takes before he gets knocked out of the game behind this horrendous offensive line?
A crazy week. Vernon Davis being traded to the Broncos usually would be the story of the year, and it was the second biggest story of the week. I thought the 49ers made a mistake, frankly, by not trading Kaepernick, by leaving him on the roster and then leaving the door open for him maybe to start again this season, which, given what we've seen from Gabbert in his career, is probable. Only points out how ridiculous this situation is. What can we expect from Gabbert, if anything? I thought he looked pretty good in the preseason. You don't want to put too much credence in the preseason, but he got behind that first-string offensive line, if it's technically a first-string offensive line, but against second-string defenses, they look pretty good. Can we really surmise anything from that preseason? Can we surmise anything from those 3 years in Jacksonville where he was objectively terrible? I mean, what can we expect from this guy?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, first of all, year one, he comes out of college, out of Missouri, goes 10th in the draft, right? And he winds up playing 14 games, I think starting 14 games, and he got sacked the third most in the NFL.
Yeah.
And he lost a lot of his confidence, and it became kind of a, just get rid of the football as fast as possible. And he kind of played the position with a little bit of fear and a lot of apprehension. Now, he seemed to have been cleansed of that in this latest preseason where he completed 83% of his passes. Just in talking to Greg Cosell a little bit from NFL Films, I think the belief is that the timing is going to be a little bit better. The ball's going to come out on time. I think it's going to look a little cleaner.
Yeah.
But still, he's operating behind a horrendous offensive line, that 3/5 of which should not be starting.
Absolutely.
And that's going to be the same offensive line. No Carlos Hyde, maybe no Anquan Bolden, no Vernon Davis.
Nope.
The weapons are not great. The running game's not strong. So I think what we're going to see is we're going to see a lot of incomplete passes. We're going to see a guy, though, who is going to make some first downs. I think the offense is going to have a drive or two over the course of the game where you feel like they're in sync a little bit. I think they will go hurry up a little bit to try to take advantage, try to neutralize some of the pass rush.
Yeah.
And I do expect that there'll be a lot of broken plays, plays where, you have to scrap it and go to the next one. Unlike Kaepernick, though, who's going to put the ball down and run for a first down,
Right.
This guy won't. So he's going to have to find receivers, and the ball's going to have to come out on time, and I think it will. I think it's going to look better. I don't think it's going to be appreciably different. I don't think they're going to be a 40-point-a-game team,
No.
but I think they're going to be a better offensive team than they've been under Kaepernick.
I have to agree with that. Just watching Kaepernick regress this season, I don't know if it's the yips. I don't know if he forgot how to play. I don't know what's going on here, but he was never necessarily the most heady guy. He was never going to put every ball directly on the money like a Tom Brady or anything like that. But his athleticism was able to sort of make up for that for a long period of time. And with behind this offensive line, that might have been a detriment. You especially with quarterbacks who are typically behind good offensive lines, you say you want a guy who can run it. Well, when you always have that escape route, you're not really going to go through your progressions too much. So that might have gotten into his head a little bit. But watching Kaepernick this year reminded me of watching like high school kids who weren't going to cut it in college. I remember sitting on a football field or standing on a football field in South Florida, and hundreds of kids all around, top prospect, growing part of the country, and standing there with a couple of offensive coordinators from the SEC and watching them go over and over and over again with the same drill: 15-yard out, 20-yard out, 25-yard out. And I asked one of them, why are we doing this? I've seen this same throw now 100 times. Like, let's move on to a new drill. Let's see what else they got. And they go, no, 15 is you can play in college. 20 is you can play at a high level in college. And 25 is NFL. Colin Kaepernick couldn't do any of the three when he got benched. I mean, he was out. He couldn't throw a 15-yard out anymore. That's why I think it might be the yips. I mean, I don't know what's going on here. And that's why I think, frankly, it was kind of a mistake for the Niners not to have completely severed ties with him, because now we're not going to see an appreciable difference with this Gabbert offense. It will look a little bit better aesthetically probably, but it's not going to just suddenly change overnight into a good offense because he's a quarterback. And that will keep the door open for Kaepernick, and who knows if he'll ever get out of this funk, and who knows if 3 games or 2 games is going to get him out of this funk either. I'm I'm not sure what the plan is here anymore. And
Well, I mean,
maybe that's the case the entire season.
Greg Cosell said it best when he said he was mentally locked up right now. And he is. He's mentally locked up. So they had to make a switch. As far as what to do with him at this point, I think they're doing the right thing. Simply because I think when you really look at it, there's a lot of disappointment here that he's not the guy.
Right.
And that they're going to have to start anew and find the next guy. But there are other teams around the league that will look at their own situation and look at him and say, he might not be the guy for them, but we're intrigued by his skill set, and we're going to take a chance that he's better than the guy that we have.
Right.
So I really believe that you never give away assets in life, and I don't. And the NFL is no different. He's an asset,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't give him away. And maybe they felt like they were forced into that mode. If they wait till the end of the year, there'll be more teams that can reassess their quarterback situation, may have cap room, and they may be able to get some asset in return coming back. And any asset coming back would be better than just coughing him up and getting nothing. So the other thing you got to remember is, what if Gabbert plays 3 downs and gets hurt?
Right.
They don't have a third quarterback on this roster. So this is where, if Trent Baalke had gone into the draft and found a prospect or two that he liked over the last couple of years, then they could have severed ties with Kaepernick right now and known that if Gabbert's not the guy, they're going to plan C.
Right.
They don't have a plan C, and so thus they need to keep Kaepernick on the roster. It's awkward. It's a little it's a little uncomfortable, I'm sure, for Kaepernick and for others. But ultimately, I don't think it matters. You just got to put your best player on the field and hope you can keep him healthy.
And obviously, there aren't a lot of trades other than Vernon Davis going to the Broncos, but I thought that this would have been the time to get an asset where there's still maybe the perception that there's a value there, and you can get the value this season. You get him in for a couple of weeks. I mean, he's not exactly running a complex offense with the Niners. They're running a one-read offense. He can certainly learn that somewhere else with their terminology. There's no question in my mind that Colin Kaepernick will not be on this team, the 49ers, next year. I mean, there's just not a doubt in my mind. They're going to cut him. That contract is too good for the team to not cut him in that situation. So why are we prolonging the inevitable here? Why not? And if everyone knows they're just going to cut him, why would they bother giving up a third or a fourth rounder for him down the line? Because they can get him for free.
There's a lot of different options, a lot of different ways to look at this. I mean, one, you may have had to get the approval of ownership. Maybe the ownership wasn't willing to sign off on it. Maybe they don't feel confident that Trent Baalke is the general manager they want to go forward with, and they don't want him to say goodbye to this asset until they have the next architect. Or possibly they don't have a lot of belief in Jeep Chris and Jim Tom Sula, and that they don't want to necessarily throw a quarterback who helped them reach a Super Bowl out without either A, knowing who the next guy is, or B, getting something of significance back in trade. So we're not really, they're not talking right now. We don't really know what the internal thinking is. Heck, we don't know who the internal brain trust is going forward.
Right.
So there's a lot of unknowns now. Ultimately, I think what they had to do, they've done, and that was, it wasn't working with Colin Kaepernick. It wasn't happening. They needed to get him off the field. They've done that. And now I'd like to see them take a 3 or 4 week look at Gabbert and see what they've got. Because what if he's good?
Yeah.
What if he's bad? I mean, how you approach this position for 2016 will be largely predicated on what he shows in this whatever number of game tryout he gets.
And let's not forget, this guy was a top 10 pick. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. I mean, it's not as if he's 25, 26 years old. He's probably not completely damaged goods. And there's a possibility that he is. Probably never really will find out. I mean, this 49ers team looks an awful lot like those awful Jacksonville teams that he was on and had his career completely derailed by. The real question is, does Colin Kaepernick ever take another snap for the 49ers again? I don't think he does.
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I'd love to say, definitively, yes, he does, or no, he doesn't. But once again, I mean, we've seen him play incredible football.
Yeah.
We've seen him play incredibly poor football. And probably where he actually sits is somewhere in between. Can we even fairly evaluate a guy who's operating with no running back in a running scheme, without a dominant receiver, with no great tight ends, and behind a horrendous offensive line? I mean, let's be honest, his equation, or the 49ers equation for winning football games, has eroded. And has his game eroded? Sure. But how much of that is tied
Yeah.
to the players around him? It's a team game. There's so many close-ups in the NFL on the head coach and the quarterback that the fans fascinate on the head coach and the quarterback. But it's a 53-man roster and 22 guys start. And if your offensive line's horrendous and you don't have receivers and you don't have a running back, you're not going to be good no matter who you are. So I'm not giving him a pass because he's been horrendous and he needs to sit. But I'm also not willing to just sign off his entire career until I see a little bit more out of Gabbert and I see a little bit more of what are their options going forward sans Kaepernick.
Right.
I mean, if you're going to, guys who aren't as good as Kaepernick, then maybe you stay with Kaepernick. So we'll see. There's a lot of this story that still needs to be written.
And it's going to be an unknown pretty much for the rest of the season, just because we know what this 49ers offense is, which is not talented enough. It's hard to really focus on Sunday's game. We don't know what's going to happen with the offense. We have no idea what the quarterback's going to look like behind this offensive line and with these receivers and who the heck's going to play. But I can tell you this from watching the film, Julio Jones is going to have a really nice game on Sunday. That guy's a beast, and the 49ers, I'm not sure, can stop him if they put 4 guys on him. I mean...
Well, and I'll tell you, this one's bitter, too, because I think there's a lot of 49er fans that wanted to see Dan Quinn as the 49ers head coach and not the Falcons head coach. And you look at Atlanta, they don't have a lot as far as pass rush. They don't have a lot on their defensive front.
No.
But Dan Quinn has rolled into that situation, and the Falcons are one of the playoff teams in the NFC right now. So how much of is that Dan Quinn working his magic on the defensive side of the ball? And to me, I think that would have been a great guy to come in for Jim Harbaugh and take over the reins. Obviously, they didn't feel that way, and now they get to see Sunday, what they potentially could have had.
It's gonna be fascinating on so many more levels than just an NFL football game. Atlanta is an intriguing team in general, and you mentioned it. They don't necessarily have the most talent. I like Matt Ryan. Obviously, Julio Jones is an elite player in the league, but in the offensive line has shown some pretty good rushing ability. I mean, Devontae Freeman, I think, still leads the NFL in rushing. He's a good back. Everyone has known that for a while, but they really make some big holes for him in the run game. Defensively, though, I mean, they're pretty weak. And the big joke this week was, the 49ers wanted Blaine Gabbert to start against a weak Falcons pass defense, and I believe Atlanta retweeted that tweet with a "Oh." We're not exactly dealing with the cream of the crop, and yet how many? This team's in first place. I mean, or second place in a pretty tough division.
Well, I mean, you could make an argument. And first of all, it's about a couple things in football. Football on defense, it's about can you rush, can you cover.
Yeah.
And right now, I think Quinn is scheming their defense to the point where he's covering a lot of their weaknesses. Offensively, you can make an argument that they have the best receiver in football and maybe the best running back in football.
Yes.
Devontae Freeman, coming into this year, hadn't accomplished a lot, but he has been phenomenal this year. He's very strong between the tackles, but he also has explosive speed.
Yeah.
So they have a runner. They have the best receiver, and he's a big physical guy who commands, who can beat one-on-one coverage on the outside all by himself.
Yeah.
So they have bullets in their gun offensively. They got Matt Ryan, who was a first-round pick, who's still in the prime of his career. What surprised me, I think, the most about the Falcons is that their offensive line has enabled them to play good football. I was not bullish on their offensive line,
no.
and yet they've gotten a lot out of it. So I think ultimately, though, if you're a 49er fan, I think you can learn something from the Falcons. If you can scheme up your defense and you have legitimate bullets in your gun, you're going to be able to win football games, and that's the Falcons.
Watching Atlanta, what do you think they do? Do they blitz Gabbert into submission, or do they drop back like the 49ers did against Joe Flacco and say, give me your best shot, big boy?
I think they're going to put pressure in his face. I think if they're smart, the 49ers have Marcus Martin. He's being overwhelmed at the center spot.
It is so bad.
The one common denominator we've seen in a lot of these football games is the Niners are getting a lot of pressure, like double A gap pressure, because people realize Martin can't either handle it, physically can't handle it, or also doesn't make the right calls and doesn't get them into the right look. So
and they've been having Boone call out the snap counts recently.
I do think that will be the game plan, though. They're not. The one thing I think you can say definitively, I think Gabbert is going to be more accurate in the short and intermediate range than Kaepernick, and I think Dan Quinn understands that. So I don't think he's going to drop extra guys into coverage. I think he's going to send more rushers and probably more rushers up the middle and try to flush him out of the pocket. Because unlike Kaepernick, who gets flushed and beats you for 50 yards on a run, Gabbert won't do that.
Right.
So I think you'll see them blitz Gabbert quite a bit and kind of try to speed up the Niner clock and then rally up aggressively on all the routes underneath. And that means that there'll be some big plays out there for the 49er receivers if they can get beyond that first 10 yards, but it's going to be a challenge to do that.
And I'm so happy you brought that up because we haven't focused a lot on Torrey Smith, on a team that didn't have so many problems. Signing a big money number one receiver that has done nothing this year would be the main storyline. He's like 9th on this Niner team. Torrey Smith now needs to earn his money. The excuse that Colin Kaepernick can't throw a 15-yard out is gone. Blaine Gabbert, no matter what, can probably make that throw. So Torrey Smith is going to need to find some separation on something other than a 9 route for the first time this year. Atlanta's probably going to give it to him. If he doesn't show up, I feel very confident saying he's a bust.
Well, he's an established player. I mean, everybody knows who Torrey Smith is. He's a go route guy. He's not a guy who runs the full tree, has questionable ball skills. Have you ever gone to the carnival and played that basketball shooting game where you had the ball that barely fit in the rim and you could shoot it perfectly and the ball...
It's like a metaphor for my life.
Ultimately, that's when you have a quarterback that has pinpoint accuracy. Like, let's take Tom Brady and the Patriots a few years ago when they had Randy Moss.
Yeah.
You had Brady with pinpoint accuracy throwing to Randy Moss, who could really catch anything in the vicinity. He had unbelievable radius, exactly. And now what you have in Kaepernick and Torrey was the opposite. You got a guy who can only catch it if it's right there on the hands, who doesn't have a great radius.
95-mile-per-hour fastballs.
And you got a guy who can't put it in a tight window. So the chances that duo was ever going to be prolific was fool's gold. It was never going to happen. The quarterback's not accurate enough, and the receiver's range and radius is not great enough. I think that's where you run into issues. Accuracy is the one thing you can't coach. Yeah. And Colin Kaepernick is not very accurate. I guess Sunday we're going to find out if Blaine Gabbert is.
This team would be far more interesting if they weren't so predictable. I mean, we've seen the writing on the wall to getting to this point, this rock bottom point for weeks now. I mean, in the preseason, it was obvious that this offensive line was garbage. And it's just been all building up to this. So I guess there's a little bit of intrigue now because it's all bets are off. And we'll see what happens. I don't even think it's fair to ask anyone to venture a prediction on this game. I mean, who the hell knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, no, I mean, I actually personally think that Gabbert's going to play pretty well. I think the timing, I think there have been plays out there. I think the 49ers last year and in years prior didn't have requisite speed. Now they have the requisite speed. Mm-hmm. You can say whatever you want about Torrey, and I just said he's not a great route runner, but he is a go pattern monster. He does a legitimate speedster who gains separation. Now, can you get him the ball? And all these little screen passes, the guys are open for a tick or two. But by the time Kaepernick could get his feet around and get his arm around and all of a sudden recognize where the guy was and get it out, now the coverage was there and a big gainer turns into a small gainer. I think Gabbert's going to have a better chance at recognizing where he wants to go with the ball and getting the ball out on time. And I think what you're going to see is offensive rhythm. And you haven't seen offensive rhythm in a long, long time here because Alex Smith didn't play with a lot of rhythm consistently, and Kaepernick never has.
Right.
So it's been a long time since 49er fans have actually seen an offense and a quarterback in a rhythm. And I guarantee you're going to see a little bit of that Sunday.
And then, ultimately, they'll probably have 3 running backs that they signed off the street this week.
And that's the other thing. I mean, it's like, I've heard people say it's not Trent Baalke's fault. When you're signing running backs off the street in Week 8, your general manager didn't do a good enough job. Yeah. And there's no ambiguity about that.
Mm-hmm. It's not good. I have no idea. I mean, listen, running back's a pretty easy position to slide into. The calls are pretty much all the same. You run 25, 24, whatever. I mean, that's not going to be too hard. These guys have been in zone schemes before. I don't think that they're going to be bogged down by the playbook at all. At the same time, there's a reason these guys were on the street, and now they're going to go behind center that's giving up the most, or not allowing any rushing yards, 32nd in the NFL, a right guard who's I think 27th for rushing yards behind him, and a right tackle who's 32nd. So good luck with that, guys.
Well, and you know what? Hey, why don't the 49ers have a great back? Don't they invest picks in backs? Oh yeah, they could run the Michael James. Oh yeah, he was a second round pick and he's out of the league. So
Yep.
they have invested picks in tight ends, running backs, and wide receivers in the first 4 rounds. They just haven't picked the right ones. So we'll see. We'll see what comes Sunday. I think the offense will look a little better. I think there'll be an uplifted mood around the team because I think this whole quarterback situation has just kind of dragged the whole team down. I think the 49ers will score a few points. I think they'll lose, but I think it'll be a competitive football game.
Well, that's something that we haven't seen in a few, so that would definitely be an upgrade.
Seriously, let's make the second half meaningful.
Let's do it. And then after the second half, listen to Larry Krueger on the post-game show and bring positive thoughts, because right now we're looking for positive thoughts, just any that you can throw our way. Larry Krueger, Dieter Kurtenbach. Good day, Australia.